In this lesson, we will be studying macroevolution and speciation, or the formation of new species. Speciation is when one species splits into two distinct species. This occurs in two distinct phases. First, there must be reproductive isolation. Second, there's genetic divergence, which is the accumulation of many genetic differences in the two populations that have been separated out. Generally, this requires more than just evolutionary change in the population. Remember, we have to have reproductive isolation as well. Let's look at a couple of roots. The first one, allo, refers to other or different. Sim refers to same or similar, like symmetry or symmetric. Patric refers to country. So a patriot, for example, is loyal to their country. When we start adding these together, we'll get the types of speciation. So allopatric happens in other countries. There are two separate countries where two species will evolve. Sympatric happens in the same country or same area. We will see that sympatric speciation is due to preference or problems in ploidy. There are two major ways that speciation can occur. The first is allopatric speciation. This is speciation with geographic isolation. During allopatric speciation, reproductive isolation occurs due to a physical barrier dividing up the population. After the physical division of the two populations, we see natural selection acting in different ways, causing the accumulation of genetic variations in the two groups. Eventually, these two groups will become so different that they will no longer be able to reproduce, even if they did wind up back in the same area. One example is shown here. The Isthmus of Panama has divided many groups of organisms in the Caribbean Sea and the Pacific Ocean. Because of the geographic isolation, these animals and plants have also been reproductively isolated, and natural selection has worked on them differently, providing us with different species. Here we see another example of allopatric speciation. We start with one initial population of ground squirrels. They are all fairly similar, although there are some genetic variations within the population. There's reproductive isolation due to some geographic barrier. In this case, there's a river that these animals will not cross. The two populations have genetic divergence. Over time, we see that either side of the river has a distinct population, and they are no longer genetically the same. Eventually, these animals will not be able to interbreed, and we have two different species of ground squirrels evolve. Allopatric speciation is also common on islands. When a group or population of birds is isolated on an island from the mainland population, they will often adapt rapidly to their new environment. We've seen this happen with Darwin's finches out in the Galapagos Islands and out on other island chains like Hawaii. The second type of speciation is sympatric speciation. This is when new species arise even though there is no geographical barrier. There are three ways that sympatric speciation can occur. The first is polyploidy, the second is habitat differentiation, and the third is sexual selection. Polyploidy occurs when there is an error in cell division, particularly in plants. Animals tend to be less tolerant of this process, and the embryos usually die early in development. Plants, though, can tolerate polyploidy, and this process has given us many new species. Polyploidy results in an increase in the number of chromosomes. Offsprings are not able to reproduce with parent species, so they often self-fertilize, leading to a new population and a new species. Here's an example of polyploidy. We have a parent species with a diploid number of 2 n equals 6 chromosomes. There is an error during meiosis, which results in a problem dividing up the chromosomes. This means that the gametes will have the wrong number of chromosomes. If self-fertilization occurs, the plant will then fertilize its own egg and sperm cells, resulting in a tetraploid plant that has 4n equals 12, so twice as many chromosomes as the original parent plant. Humans have learned to use polyploidy to our advantage. There are some types of plants, usually seedless ones, that have occurred due to a polyploidy event. These seedless plants are sterile, but it's usually good for us to eat. For example, seedless watermelons don't have seeds for us to spit out, but it is a sterile plant, so we have to find other ways to keep that line going. Habitat differentiation occurs when different groups within the population pick different parts of the habitat or different resources to use. A classic example of this are apple maggot flies. These flies started out growing on hawthorn trees, which are native to North America. When apples were introduced, the flies started using apples as a food source as well. However, some of the flies prefer the apples, while others prefer the hawthorn fruit. We see now that gene flow is being reduced between these two groups of flies. Even though there is no physical barrier dividing up the two groups, they prefer different fruit and self-separate based on that habitat preference. So we see that the flies that are born and raised on apples tend to mate and prefer other flies from apples, while flies born and raised on hawthorn fruit tend to prefer other flies on hawthorn fruit. The third way we can have sympatric speciation occur is through sexual selection. This is when organisms are picky about their mates. This leads to separation based on certain traits. So in this example with the lizards, we have blue lizards and green lizards. The females are going to choose mates that look like them. So blue lizards will mate with blue lizards and green lizards will mate with green lizards. There is no physical barrier dividing these two groups. This again is all preference based on coloration or some other flashy trait and female choice. Eventually we see that reproductive isolation occurs, and these organisms will start to have genetic differentiation as well. So differences will occur between the two groups, and eventually they will not be able to reproduce together, causing the speciation event or formation of two different species.